Zombies have probably been a thing in all forms of media. Movies, TV shows, books, comics, video games, you know, etc. I think this was definitely more prominent in the mid to late 2000s. I don't know, it just felt like everyone was obsessed with the apocalypse at that time.
Fortnite.
So it's kind of crazy to think that less than a few decades before then, zombies were pretty much a dying genre. Just like westerns and many other genres before it, the zombie genre became cliched and predictable. It was expected that zombies would have just faded into obscurity and would have just become another parody comedy movie in the 2000s. However, the exact opposite happened after 28 Days Later released in 2002. Directed by Danny Boyle and Alex Garland, 28 Days Later basically revived the zombie genre, and arguably became one of the most iconic horror movies of the 21st century so far. If it weren't for this movie, most zombie media that we've seen now wouldn't exist. This movie truly started the zombie era of the mid to late 2000s. Not only was this movie ahead of its time, but easily had some of the most terrifying and most tension-inducing visuals and sequences in arguably any film, I'd say. The movie was also the beginning for some pretty unknown actors at the time who would eventually move on to have very successful careers. This movie truly became a modern horror classic. But what makes 28 Days Later what it is? In this video, I'll be discussing what makes this movie so terrifying, but yet such a masterpiece at the same time. So yeah, let's get into it. One of the main concepts that makes 28 Days Later so terrifying is isolation. Right after we see the title card, we see Jim wake up in a hospital and then enters London to see it completely empty. And then in this fever dream-like scene, we see Jim walk around the empty London as he slowly comes to the realization of what's really happening. I think what makes this scene so haunting is just the concept of it. Waking up alone in a place that's usually bustling with life, to it just to be completely silent and deserted, with the music in the background just selling that fear, as it kind of sounds like it's mirroring Jim's heartbeat in a way. However, I think the scene after this is far more terrifying. The scene where Jim is in the church genuinely just feels like a straight up nightmare. Everything from the cinematography, the sound design, the lighting. A part of this scene which is burnt in my brain is when we see all of the bodies in the altar as Jim calls out.
Hello?
There's something about how the infected move and stir which is just really uncanny. This whole 10 minutes of the movie just have this terrifying dream feel to it. To me, it gives off the same vibe of those Backrooms analog horror videos. The great thing is that this gritty but dreamlike feel that the movie has does stay relatively consistent for most of the movie, but can also change depending on the scene. I think a perfect example of this is the scene where Jim goes back to his house after he finds his parents passed away. There's a scene where Jim stays up and reminisces about the past, where we get a scene of Jim and his parents with this home-like video camera quality to it. And while all this is happening, the infected burst into the house, turning the dream back into a nightmare. Other scenes when the movie gives off this dreamlike feel is when the characters escape London, as we get a scene where the car drives by a field filled with flowers, and as you can tell, the scene very much resembles an old painting. It's probably one of my favourite shots in the entire film. Another amazing scene in this film, which basically proves my point of this movie being like a fever dream, is Jim's nightmare, where the nightmare feel is just ramped up tenfold.
Well, no fucking shit.
And last but not least is the ending of the film, where first it's another dream sequence with the same nightmare-like feel as all the other scenes. But when Jim wakes up, you can clearly tell something's different, as the camera quality is a lot more clear now, which, how at least I see it, is supposed to resemble the more hopeful atmosphere, with Jim finding a found family with Selena and Hannah. Also, I almost forgot to mention the kind of cool little thing they did with the sign on the outside first saying hell, and then after the dream sequence and the ending it says hello. I don't know, I just thought that was a nice touch. Okay, so obviously the main thing what people think when they think of 28 Days Later is zombies, obviously. And before you give me the whole, well, actually, they are not zombies, they are infected. Yes, I know, they are technically not undead like most zombies, but the movie is still a part of the zombie genre. So they are technically still zombies, but also not really. And if you disagree, I don't know, go outside or something. As we know, zombies were originally supposed to be a metaphor for social decay, and also a metaphor for consumerism, while Danny Boyle and Alex Garland decided to break all of the rules while making 28 Days Later. As if there was one word to describe the infected in 28 Days Later, it would be one word only. Rage. In the opening scene of the movie, we see things such as violence, war, riots. All of these things mirror with the infected's nature, becoming something akin to rabid animals more than humans. Everything about the infected in this movie is just fucking terrifying, as all it takes is just one bite or a single drop of blood, and you don't even have a lot of time to react because it only takes around 10 to 20 seconds for you to become infected. Then you become a rage-filled monster hell-bent on ripping anything apart that moves. And obviously the main thing that people know about the infected is that they are incredibly fucking fast. Many people give 28 Days Later credit for being the first movie to make zombies run. And granted, there were movies before 28 Days Later where the zombies could run, but 28 Days Later was definitely the movie that revolutionised the concept of zombies running. I think something that people don't give the infected in this movie credit though is the design. I think the infected's design is definitely a prime example of less is more. Unlike the rotting corpse designs of The Walking Dead and the infected fungus designs of The Last of Us, 28 Days Later goes for a lot more of a simple approach by having blood red eyes and constant leaking of blood from the eyes, mouth and nose. Although it might not sound like much, it just gives the infected this raw, aggressive design. You can feel the rage just by looking at them. The rage virus is probably one of the most, if not the most, realistic depiction of a zombie virus in media, as the virus was heavily inspired by rabies. It's no wonder why the infected in this movie revived the zombie genre. Well, actually, they're not zombies infected, they're the same thing, just shut up! Another thing I love about 28 Days Later is definitely its characters, as I think the characters in this movie are simple but also complex. The main characters that we mainly follow throughout the movie are Jim, Selena, and Frank and Hannah, with each character representing a different side of the same apocalypse. First, we'll start with Jim. The movie starts off with Jim being scared and confused and desperately searching for answers, which is why one of the first things he does is to go to church, not only to seek answers but also to seek comfort, which ultimately he doesn't find either of those things. And it's also why he's so adequate to find the location of the military blockade, as they claim to have the answer to infection. Another big part of Jim's character is definitely his empathy as well, as he starts off unwilling to kill and tries to cling on to hope as much as he can, which inevitably also clashes with Selena's character, as what she believes in her own words is staying alive is as good as it gets. Selina at first comes off as very cold, as she doesn't hesitate to kill Mark after seeing the cut on his arm, and later telling Jim,
"And just so you know where you stand, if it happens to you, I'll do it in a heartbeat."
She's, at first at least, a person without hope. An example of this is how she is the one who is the most hesitant about trying to find the military blockade, as she believes the damage from the virus is already done. It at first seems like that Selina only cares about herself, as her main concern of other people is if they're going to slow her down or not. However, we do eventually learn that that isn't exactly the case, as all of this definitely seems like a response to everything that she's gone through. Because as we see later on during the film, she's genuinely a really nice and caring character. I believe her arc in this movie is about her gaining her humanity back and realising that there is still hope. It takes meeting Jim, Frank and Hannah to get to that point. Speaking of Frank, in my opinion, Frank is arguably one of, if not the best character in the movie.
Marmalade time.
He's very much the father of the group, obviously being the father of Hannah and then being kind of a father figure to Jim and Selina as well. Frank is definitely the character that brings the best out of everyone, which makes it even more heartbreaking when Frank is eventually infected and then killed by the soldiers. Everything about this scene is just beyond heartbreaking, and it's a big reminder in this movie that no one is safe. One last thing I want to talk about before we move on is the shopping scene, as I think this scene definitely shows the best of the characters, as this scene shows the hope in humanity, and has the characters appreciate the little things that we usually take advantage of. It's just a really wholesome and hopeful scene, and just a great scene overall. If you ask me, 28 Days Later probably has one of the greatest third acts in any movie I've seen. After finding out the soldiers' true intentions, Jim tries to escape with Selina and Hannah but is ultimately captured. Him and another soldier who stuck up to Henry West are eventually brought out to execution, which Jim is ultimately able to escape from. And after this, he lures some of the soldiers out using the alarm at the blockade. And this begins, in my opinion, one of the best and brutal third acts I've ever seen in a film, as we see Jim use literal guerrilla war tactics against some of the soldiers, and then leaves Henry West to be eaten alive by a group of infected. Eventually he goes back to the mansion and frees the infected that was chained outside. And then human and infected work together, taking out the soldiers one by one. And while this is all happening, we probably get one of the greatest and most fucking raw themes of any movie. The way how it just builds up and then ultimately just explodes, seeming to mirror not only the infected's rage, but also and mainly Jim's rage, as Jim just goes full fucking John Wick on the soldiers. It's as if something primal has just awakened inside of him, as he develops a kind of rage similar to the infected, as before he was completely unwilling to kill, being scared of, afraid of this new world. He even expresses guilt for killing an infected earlier in the film. So you'd think when Jim has this ultimate crash out, you'd think it would feel weird and out of character, but it's not. It feels earned, as the message is clear. We all have rage inside of us. It's an emotion that we just cannot get rid of. The only difference between us and the infected is that we can turn rage on and off. So instead of Jim just becoming a cold-blooded killer, killing anything in his path, he uses this rage and this violence to protect the ones he cares about. It's also interesting when you compare Jim's character development to Selina's character development, as the movie starts off with Jim unwilling to kill, and then we have Selina who will kill in a heartbeat if it's necessary for survival. And then for the rest of the movie, they both go through major character development, with Selina becoming more loving and caring again, as she begins to rediscover hope, and Jim realising to protect himself and the ones he cares about, he has to fight. Now we have the scene that solidifies this arc, Jim finds one of the last soldiers and beats him to death, grabbing him and smashing his head in with rage almost identical to the infected. And then he proceeds to crush the man's fucking eyes with his bare hands. This kill is fucking brutal, with Selena understandably believing that Jim's infected himself. As she goes in for the kill, she stops, realising that he's not infected, and then Jim says this iconic line.
That was longer than a heartbeat.
This third act is just peak. There's really just no way to describe it. Everything from the raw emotion, the cinematography, the soundtrack. Seriously though, this movie's soundtrack is just a fucking masterpiece. I'm so glad that they went with this third act instead of the one that was cut. Yeah, good god, that one was just weird. What was that, bro? So overall, not only is 28 Days Later one of the best zombie movies of all time, it's arguably one of the best horror movies of all time, at least in the 21st century. Maybe I'm coming off as a bit biased since it's my favourite horror movie besides from, I guess, Jaws, if you want to count that as a horror movie. But there is genuinely so much to love about this movie. Not only did it start the zombie era of the 2000s, but it's also probably the reason why actors like Cillian Murphy and Naomi Harris became such successful actors. And obviously when it came out, it made bank. So it's no surprise that a sequel was greenlit. Now, I'm gonna briefly talk about 28 Weeks Later, 28 Years and The Bone Temple, but only briefly. My opinion on 28 Weeks Later is, it is a very fucking good zombie movie. Like, don't get it twisted, it is a very fucking entertaining zombie movie. But it's not a good sequel to 28 Days Later. I think besides from the main theme, it just doesn't feel like a 28 movie. Besides from that opening scene, good god, that opening scene was peak. It's probably one of my favourite opening scenes in any horror movie, if not any movie in general. So it's no surprise in that I found out that Danny Boyle had somewhat of control of this opening scene. But I thought the rest of the movie was decent. It's definitely a lot more action-packed than the first movie, but at the same time, it does seem to shy away from the horror that made the first movie so great. It reminds me a lot of Alien and Aliens, as the first movie was a lot more horror-centric, while the second movie was a lot more of an action movie than a horror movie. Which, in my opinion, it works for Aliens, but I don't think the same approach works for 28 Weeks Later. Now, thankfully, although 28 Weeks Later didn't feel like a sequel to the first movie, 28 Years Later definitely is more of a step in the right direction, I think. Although it's very different to what I thought it was going to be, I still really enjoyed the movie though. I don't want to get too into it because I'm going to be talking about it very soon on a later video, but I will say that it is very good. I think it's a really good coming of age story along with being a very good zombie horror movie. And overall a great start to this next trilogy, though that ending was just absolutely fucking bonkers. What the fuck was that shit? Right now, at the time of recording this video, The Bone Temple relatively just came out, and honestly, I'll say, if you thought the ending of the last movie was insane, this one, Jesus fucking Christ. Spoilers if you've not seen the movie, so if you've not seen it, I would just skip. But this movie literally ends with a fucking Iron Maiden concert. Like, I genuinely felt like I was on acid watching this movie. But just like the last one, this movie is very solid. I think if you weren't a fan of Years Later, you'll probably like this one a lot more. Personally, I like both of them though. Jack O'Connell and Ray Fiennes are probably the best part about this movie. They basically carry the entire movie, which, I mean, it makes sense since they're obviously the main characters and all. And I can't forget about my boy Samson. But overall, yeah, a very solid trilogy so far. I honestly can't wait for the third film. Please please make the third movie. I know the Bone Temple didn't do so well in the box office, but please don't pull a Transformers 1 and have the first film be peak but make no money and then we don't get a sequel. If that happens again, I'm gonna fucking crash out. Thanks for watching this video. I appreciate you sticking around. I'm gonna say it again, but sorry for the lack of consistency in uploads. I'll probably try and upload some smaller scale videos just to, you know, have more of a consistent upload. I hope to get a lot more videos out for 2026. I'll also probably start a second channel sometime in the future. Probably just more real life things like vlogs and stuff like that. So overall, thanks for watching. If you want, you know, leave a like, sub, and yeah, in a bit.